Business has always been about turning a profit, making money. But can it stand for something more? Something beyond dollars and cents? We think so. We think that today, business has a higher calling, a purpose to be fair and just, to do right by their workers, customers, communities, and the environment. And it turns out companies successful doing that also do better for their bottom line. When you see the Just Capital seal, it means this company is a force for good. Visit justcapital.com to learn more.
And good afternoon. We're doing it live in the 4 o'clock hour, rain or shine, live here on 790 KABC, streaming live online worldwide at KABC.com, and the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast at KABC.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Well, we're kicking off this holiday-shortened week a bit lower as investors await earnings news from AI darling NVIDIA. That'll be coming out tomorrow, Wednesday, as well as new clues from the Federal Reserve on interest rates after last week's inflation reports, which came in hotter than expected at both the consumer level as well as the wholesale level. The Dow coming in for a closing loss today of 64 points. The S&P 500 dipped 30, and the NASDAQ gave back 145 points. Sure feels like a Monday, but it is a Tuesday coming off of President's Day, so we are in a holiday-shortened week here. We see Walmart and Home Depot both delivered earnings reports. Investors focused more on NVIDIA, though, which had a big plunge today. I'll talk more about that in just a moment, the AI darling. We also got the latest reading on leading economic indicators. Falling last month, its 22nd straight decline. Yep, you heard me. The 0.4% decline for January still offered signs of hope, though, according to MarketWatch, with 6 of 10 components showing positive results. It's been 2 years since that happened. Big merger deal in the financial services business. Capital One closing slightly higher today after news of the bank's plan to buy Discover Financial Services. Discover shares soared nearly 13% on news of the planned tie-up in an all-stock deal valued at more than $35 billion, the biggest deal of the year so far. Walmart up 3.3% today on its earnings news, and Home Depot up 0.1% after its earnings missed expectations on same-store sales and offered a full-year outlook that also was disappointing on Wall Street. Well, NVIDIA is about to report another set of blowout results on Wednesday tomorrow, but today we did see a pullback. NVIDIA seeing its worst day in 4 months. Heading into the report, the stock dropped nearly 4.5% and logged its biggest single-day percentage decline since October 17th of last year, when they lost nearly 5%. NVIDIA shedding $78 billion in market value, making for its largest daily loss of market cap in its history and one of the biggest market losses for one stock in history. Watching the price of oil dipping a bit today, hovering near a 3-month high earlier after traders returned from the President's Day holiday weekend. The price of crude oil in New York pulled back $1 to $78.18. It was the second highest settlement this year after closing Friday at the highest seen since last November. Nervous time at the gas pumps once again. We'll take a closer look at what's happening there coming up later this hour. Also, Brent crude in London, the international benchmark, pulling back $1.42 back to $77.04 a barrel. The contest for Los Angeles County District Attorney heating up now with crime front and center in Los Angeles coming up later this hour. I'll be joined by the Honorable David S. Milton, retired Los Angeles Superior Court judge and candidate for L.A. County District Attorney. He participated in the United Chambers of Commerce at the San Fernando Valley Candidates Forum, which I moderated last week. Judge David S. Milton will talk about his run for DA and what he would do to fight crime here in Los Angeles. Also later this hour, joining us will be AKASH, CHOUGULE, the Vice President of Americans for Prosperity, which is calling for a new roadmap to address America's unsustainable debt levels. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, and the whole works now. Joining us live, money manager Ken WINANS, president of WINANS Investments, market historian, author of Investment Atlas 1 and 2, and also Forbes magazine contributor. Ken, thank you very much for coming to the line here following the President's Day holiday weekend. Hope it was a good one for you. Give us your reaction to the big news that we just laid out here.
Well, and Frank, I'm always amazed how you rattle things off so efficiently and effectively. I mean, I'll tell you, it's amazing to listen. But I want to get started on oil first. I am somebody who was traveling a great deal over the last couple of weeks. I had been in Las Vegas. I've been in Palm Springs, Orange County, San Diego. It was kind of my client junket for the year. And if you want to know, is there a difference at prices at the pump by simply crossing a state line, I am here to tell you absolutely. I filled up my car in the Las Vegas area. Gas was easily $1.60 to $1.70 less than when I filled up my car again once I crossed into California. So the moral of the story is we are in an election year, and I do think the gas tax is something that people should wave their banner behind. It's one of those very sad taxes that suddenly at the pump it's a little higher one day, and they love to blame the oil companies. But this is strictly coming out of Sacramento. This has nothing to do with the oil and gas companies. So that's just one thing. The other thing about oil, and I mentioned it a couple of times, I watch commodity seasonality very closely. And the simple fact is that since 2000, crude oil traditionally rises 74% of the time by as much as 6.4% during the month of February. There's a lot of reasons for it. It's refineries around the country are changing their mix. Suddenly there are more people are out driving, but this is a very common thing. But I do think it's safe to say that as more and more people are getting out, I do expect that we're going to find prices in crude are going to continue to climb. On the flip side, I know now that I've given you some bad news, let me give you some good news. Natural gas prices absolutely plummeted last month. And a lot of it's because, believe it or not, the winter is not as cold as many people thought it would be. We've had bouts of cold, and I know it still seems chilly to me, but what's ever happening, the buildup of natural gas is dissipating quickly. So there's a little yin and yang in the so things as we're looking through the commodity complex. The other thing I'd like to bring up, February is a kind of a funny month. We digest earnings. Historically, even in good years, it's not known as a great month. So we're actually having a February that is much stronger than the historical norm, and I'm taking it all the way back to 1970. But we have a lot of earnings left to go. You mentioned NVIDIA, but I would also say any of the other tech companies that are somehow part of the AI support structure, for lack of a better term, we've got a lot of companies that are still going to be reporting numbers well into the end of this month, going into next month. So any one of these numbers could cause that whole sector to be very volatile in any one given day.
On there live with money manager Ken Winans on NVIDIA. What is your $78 billion right out of their pocket in the one shot today? We've seen a tremendous run up. We've heard about NVIDIA almost every day this past couple of weeks leading up to the earnings report that's coming out tomorrow. What do you think is going to happen tomorrow when the earnings do finally come out?
It's built for perfection right now. I mean, this stock has had an amazing run, and I think it's a bit like, you can be a victim of your own success. What happens is that, NVIDIA being part of the S&P 500, it's becoming now disproportionately large within that index, which means that it's anything that happens within the index world, in the institutional world, it's not just corporate earnings any longer. It's entered that new magical phase, which people with Apple have found out the hard way. A company can still post great numbers, and it doesn't matter. Your stock's down on the year because it is part of that index. I am personally of the opinion that so much money has been made so fast in the AI sector. I think traders are beginning to take some profits. It's early in the year. It's a good time to do it. Managers are trying to show that they can once again, pocket those gains. And so, although I think the numbers are going to be amazing, I wouldn't be surprised to see more profit taking going into certainly what happened today and certainly going into tomorrow.
Another big story, Amazon is set to replace Walgreens in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. What's your reaction to that, and what's your view on Amazon here?
Well, it's funny. We often talk about, industry identity. And I know that, we talked before about how Tesla has this problem. Is Tesla AI or an automotive company? Is Amazon a tech company or a retailer? And it kind of flip-flops around between those worlds. I've decided to put it squarely in the retail camp. It seems to fit better there, and certainly on disposable income. Obviously, it came off the holidays doing very, very well. They just don't have the big problems with logistics that we often keep hearing about with other retailers. You mentioned Walgreens. Here's a company that's well over 100 years old. that, it and the other drugstore chains are having a real problem right now because companies like Amazon have figured out how to take their market share. So, again, we're going to continue to have that happening. But, again, Amazon is also going to be susceptible to the buying trends. And I continue to hear people tell me that inflation is hitting them in the pocketbook and they are pulling back their spending. And a lot of them, they obviously use credit cards during the holidays, but as often after the holidays, there's a credit card hangover. And I wouldn't be surprised to see people, especially going into the early part of this spring season, just not spending quite as much. It would not surprise me at all. But Amazon's a holding that I have. I've been having it for a long time, and certainly it's a very well-run company. Frank, one other quick thing on Amazon. We've talked before about wage push inflation. Amazon was in the crosshairs of the unions on unionization. Notice we've not heard much about that in the last 3 months. Clearly, Amazon did what they had to make sure their rank-and-file employees are happy, and they've moved forward. And that's a big, big message going forward this year.
All right. Well, we did see Amazon stock pull back a couple of dollars today. Walgreens shares up, 33 cents at 22 and change. All right. Let me ask you about the other Magnificent Seven. Anything else? Has this been fizzling out lately since we got the latest signals here on inflation and the Fed now an open question as to what their next move will be, possibly raising rates again? What do you think is going to happen here when the Fed meets again? And when do you expect any moves on rates here?
All right, well, let me start with that. Then I'm going to talk about what happened today in the market and really this last week or so, because there's some interesting rotational moves happening within the various industry groups. First off, the Fed. I've been on the show, I've been pretty constant on this, Frank, that I do not think interest rates are going to go down anytime in the foreseeable future. The big reason is wage push inflation. Companies have been talking about in their annual reports, the companies that have been figuring out a way to pass on those labor costs onto their consumers or users, they're fine. Those are companies that cannot are having trouble. We just talked about two of them, the difference between Walgreens and the difference between Amazon. They're right there. That's the big issue. So we're going to have that story played out. I don't think the Fed is going to raise interest rates, only that it would take something else to happen that would cause the inflation rate to take off. And there is, a little bit of good news out there, for those of us trying, as you often we get into these contentious election cycles, the dollar is actually increasing in value globally, and that's in spite of the inflation. The reason is our inflation picture and our economy look a lot better than Europe and most parts of Asia. So certainly when you look at the parts of the world.
You loved Lala Kent on Vanderpump Rules. Now get to know her on Give Them Lala.
We're going into Vanderpump Rules. Easton, you told me that Raquel is a little nervous. She talks about it on Rachel Goes Rogue, that she's a little nervous for her podcast to be airing while season 11 is airing. Let me tell you something. She should have come back to the show. It would have been very different than what she thinks it would have been. She shot herself in the foot. She's not the brightest bulb. We all know this.
Watch what Lala is talking about on YouTube or search for Give Them Lala wherever you listen.
That are torn by horrible war. So the dollar is strong. As long as the dollar stays strong, I don't think the Federal Reserve has to do anything to, quote unquote, defend the dollar. Although there was another interesting report out today that several countries around the world are really thinking about going back to a quasi-gold standard, meaning they would stockpile gold versus hold U.S. dollars solely as their reserve. So even with all that, things are looking okay there. So I don't think the Fed's going to raise rates. They certainly don't want to be accused of affecting an election. At the same time, they are not going to be bringing the punch bowl back to the party anytime in the foreseeable future. I think the Fed's very happy with where they're at.
All right, let's talk about gold. Gold chains and then blockchains. So let's not forget Bitcoin here moving above 52,000. Yep, you heard me. Back above 52,000 here. The all-time high was like 64K. So what's your view on the cryptos here as well as good old gold at this point?
Well, I'm going to broaden out the talk, Frank, because I like to put crypto. I'm going to try to be a trendsetter here, and I'm putting crypto in with all the other commodities. There are some commodities that are on a wild tear right now, including what's going on with crypto. I mean, it's been having an amazing year. But here's the thing about when we talk about the inflation picture, I think you want to break it down to look at the base commodity story. So when I'm looking here, certainly I have a sweet tooth, and when I look at cocoa prices up 40% this year, I'm just talking about the first 6 weeks of this year. I'm looking at cotton, orange juice, wheat, oats, going on down to cattle, anybody who's ordered a steak lately. And included with that is that gold has been very, very stable through this whole thing. The point is that I can also look at the demand side of the equation on commodities that all of us use each and every day. And I think that's reflective with a lot of the rally in crypto, in addition to the fact crypto seems to mimic what happens in the NASDAQ very, very closely. So I think that there is room to still play the commodity crypto part of that portfolio, what people in my industry like to call the alternatives. Certainly, they're still moving in the right direction, and many people can make money with those. The only surprise I have in that world is talking about with real estate. I talked to a realtor today because, as you know, I'm relocating to Las Vegas permanently later this year, and I've been talking with realtors about my home up in Northern California, and all of them have said the same thing. Prices are stabilizing a great deal because now people are comfortable with the mortgage picture. So, again, I go back to what's going on with inflation, with interest rates and all that. It's stabilizing in many, many parts of the economy. And I think that, again, will be the thing that we run through for the remainder of this year. Frank, I want to jump, if you don't mind, real quick into an interesting phenomenon that's happening right now within the stock market and various sectors. You're finding buyers in groups that had been basically beaten up last year to a pulp. And excuse the pun. One of them is the consumer area, and the other one, believe it or not, are the utilities. And I find that interesting because as we're taking money out of tech and we're taking money out of some of the other hot groups, I find it funny that it's finding a home in some of these maligned groups. So clearly, some of the earnings momentum players are beginning to become value people, and they're just rotating things around. I think that will also be a theme as we play into the fall, into the spring.
On your live with Ken Winans. Well, thanks for explaining the cocoa prices moving higher. That explains why I just paid $8 for Cocoa Puffs the other day. So we're wondering what the heck happened there. So that was extremely insightful, Ken, and it's no wonder that you're in such demand at business conferences as the keynote speaker. So thank you very much for laying it out that way. Getting back to real estate for a moment, I saw that article in the Wall Street Journal, which is notable. It said realtors are in crisis and home buyers could be the winners with this wave of lawsuits over fees paid to agents, putting the National Association of Realtors on the defense. So what about all that, and what do you see ahead for real estate?
You know, it's interesting. Anybody who's been to Washington, D.C., the minute you drive down K Street past the Capitol, the very first organization you come to is not the AFL-CIO, it's the Association of Realtors. That's how close to politics the real estate industry has been. I think this is actually going to be a tale that continues to play out really over the foreseeable future. I'm of the opinion that one of the big benefits that blockchain technologies is going to bring to all of our lives is going to be in the area of real estate. Anybody who's bought or sold anything in real estate in the last 10 years probably still shakes their head about how dated, and I dare say downright Byzantine, the entire process is to buy or sell anything. When you think about how quick it is to buy Bitcoin or a stock or a bond or anything, and yet the housing and every other piece of real estate certainly plays in. Certainly look at the drama playing out about valuations on loans in the whole court case that turned out with former President Trump. Another good example of it. We're dealing with valuation things. So the point is, I think that real estate related expenses will be under pressure a lot going forward. And again, it is an election year. Everybody's looking for a villain. I think you're going to hear this play out time and time again in the real estate area, and I think you're going to hear it time and time again in financial services, whether it's credit cards, whether why money market accounts are still not paying equal amounts to treasury bills. It's the theme that happens during election cycles, and I think it will have that play through. But, Frank, I will tell you that the real estate sector, when I look at the real estate stocks in general, they're telling me I don't have to look at what's going on from, Bureau of Labor Statistics or the Association of Realtors. I can look at these stocks and I can tell you the market is telling us real estate's going to have a good year this year, and the builders are going to continue to build, and the buyers are going to show up. Maybe there might be negotiations going on prices and financing, but the bottom line is I think the buyers are going to come back to the market.
Terrific, Ken. I wish we had even more time, but we'll have to stop there. Ken WINANS, money manager and president of WINANS Investments, market historian, author of Investment Atlas 1 and 2, and Forbes magazine contributor. It's always great to have you with us, Ken. Thank you very much, and we wish you a wonderful evening.
You too, Frank. Good night now.
Thank you very much. Friends, people like you and me have our ear to the ground in all things business. We like to be informed and, indeed, well prepared. And as important as finance is, I want you to have a plan in case you're hit by someone not paying attention to the road. Thinking ahead serves us well. Even still, we can get caught off guard as people are so focused on their destinations that they might not have a plan in place in case they're in an accident that's not their fault. And that's why I encourage you to put my friend attorney Clark Fielding's number in your phone. That number is 833-88-SHARK. So if you're in an accident, you'll be ready with your strategy to make Clark Fielding your very first call. Fielding Law aims for the highest possible settlements, considering you might need long-term care, rehab, compensation for lost wages, and any ongoing physical or emotional pain. So if you're hurt in any kind of accident, call for a free consultation with Fielding Law. You can trust them. They're honest, respected, and your strategy in case you get into that unexpected accident. Motorcycle, truck, pedestrian, scooter, hit and run, boating, or bike accidents, you name it. The number to call, 833-88-SHARK. That's 833-88-SHARK. Or go to clarkthesharklaw.com. Oh, yes, we have 790 KBC welcomes the one and only James Taylor coming to the Hollywood Bowl. This is something special coming up on May 29. Tickets on sale Friday at Ticketmaster.com. And right now, caller 9 wins at 1-888-790-5222. You can get a pair of tickets to that show if you're caller 9. Call right now, 1-888-790-5222. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. Good afternoon. Losing start to the holiday shortened week on Wall Street. Coming off the 3-day President's Day holiday weekend, we see the Dow pulling back 64 points today at 38,564. The S&P 500 down 30 at 4,975. The NASDAQ down 145 at 15,631. The yield in the 10-year note, which impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates out there, now at 4.28%. Taking a look at some of the big movers today, the big winner was Discover Financial Services on this big news that Capital One is buying Discover Financial Services in a deal valued at about $35 billion. Discover shares moving up about 13% in that news. Capital One shares closing slightly higher by 0.1%. Taking a look at Bitcoin right now, it is moving up nearly 300 at 52,285. Ethereum up 18 to 3,008, and Doge at the moment at 8.5 cents. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. Good afternoon. We're doing it live here in the 4 o'clock hour. Mottek On Money, Monday through Friday in the 4 o'clock hour, live on 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com. And yes, the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, and all the podcast platforms. Serious business here. The contest for Los Angeles County District Attorney is heating up with crime front and center in Los Angeles. And joining us live now, the Honorable David S. Milton, retired Los Angeles Superior Court judge and candidate for L.A. County District Attorney. He participated in the United Chambers of Commerce of the San Fernando Valley Candidates Forum, which I had the honor of moderating last week. Judge, thank you very much for taking the call here on the air live with Judge David S. Milton. Take it from the top, Your Honor, and tell us why you would make the best DA for Los Angeles County.
Good afternoon, Frank, and thank you very much for inviting me to participate in your program. Well, to begin with, I'll name a couple things. I'm the only Republican in the race. I am the most experienced by far in this contest. There's no question about that. And my experience just goes way beyond those of the other candidates. Some of the other candidates I'd like to point out are to the left of George Gascon. They are plants, in my view, and they will carry on the policies of George Gascon. And some of the others have changed their registration from Republican to either no party preference or Democrat. And they've done that, in my belief, in order to take advantage of the large Democratic pool of voters in Los Angeles County. I won't do that. I'm transparent, and I will always be transparent with the voters of Los Angeles County to what I stand for. I'm a Republican. I stand for Republican values. There's nothing, I would say, out of the ordinary about me. I'm common sense, law and order, fair-minded. I'm not extreme at all. There's no way you can characterize me as extreme. I'm just a person who wants to see the proper thing done. I look out for the citizens and the victims, and I want to get the district attorney's office back on it.
America starts the day with America in the Morning. Hi, I'm John Trout, your host for the latest news, politics, entertainment, business, and weather. Our staff of correspondents provide a fast-paced look at the world with specialized reports from where news happens.
In New York, I'm Sue Aller.
I'm Charles Tiladesma. Sagar Meghani, Washington.
I'm Jennifer King.
I'm Clayton Neville.
I'm Kevin Carr.
I'm Archie Zaraletta.
Concise, accurate, and fresh each day.
America in the Morning, the podcast, available wherever you listen.
Core mission, which is public safety.
On the air live with Judge Davis S. Milton, who is running for L.A. County District Attorney, and certainly the incumbent has been described as soft on crime, and certainly in that last forum you come across as tough on crime. Tell us about the difference between you and the incumbent in the approach here to fight crime here in Los Angeles County.
Well, I am tough on crime. And one glaring difference, taking the lower level felonies, for instance, Mr. Gascon has routinely used this Prop 47 language that he helped craft, and he entitled it Safe Neighborhoods and Safe Schools. Well, it's been far from that. He's misled the voters, and this is how that proposition was enacted. I think most voters who would look at that thing, they would never have agreed or voted for such a proposition. And he uses the language of Prop 47 to circumvent the law of the state of California. And let me give you, for instance, if you were to look at Penal Code Section 211, it says if you were to take any property by force or fear from the person or something attached to him or in his immediate presence, that is a robbery. By force or fear is the critical language. So if you look at these mom and pop smash and grabs, what are they doing? They're going in with sledgehammers and crowbars, and the proprietor's standing right there by the display case, and they're using force or fear to take their property. Those should be charged as robberies. Most of these smash and grab theft events should be charged as robbery. And if it's insufficient to file a robbery, at the very least, it should be a burglary. And burglary and robbery are close in their elements, but burglary is lacking the element of force and fear. So here's the test. We don't look at jurisdictional amounts of $950. That's not the analysis. The analysis is this. If you enter into any dwelling, residential or commercial, with the intent to steal anything of any value, you've at least got a burglary. And if force or fear is used, you've got a robbery. These are felonies, and these are the things, these are the charges which should be filed in these cases. But Mr. Gascon uses it to say, well, we haven't proven 950 amount, the threshold amount. That's not the analysis, but he uses that to charge misdemeanors, and they're not.
Judge David S. Milton live with us on the air here, running for Los Angeles County District Attorney. And Your Honor, it's something that we discussed at the forum last week, shoplifting up 81% in Los Angeles. And, of course, everybody's talking about that graffiti tower right in the heart of downtown Los Angeles, that place that was vandalized right across from a crypto arena, that abandoned high-rise complex. What's your reaction to that news, and what would you do to in response to this crime wave, especially as it relates to retailers and, of course, now the vandalism there on the graffiti tower?
Well, there are two different ideas here. The shoplifting or not shoplift, they're not shoplifting. There is a penal code section that was promulgated in reaction to after Prop 47. It says if you went in there and you stole something, and the evidence demonstrated that was less than $950, you could get a shoplift out of that. But if you use force or fear on the proprietor, that's a robbery all day long. Prop 47 does not affect that. And I've watched some of the proposed legislation on Prop 47 where they're attempting to legislatively amend some of the sections by allowing the prior convictions to be used in certain circumstances. I applaud those proposals. They would be good to change that important provision that Prop 47 has eliminated your criminal history for charging purposes. Now, as far as vandalism and graffiti needs to stop. If I were the judge, and this is what I used to do when I was a sitting judge. I'm a private judge now. I'm not retired. I just left the Superior Court bench in 2014, and I've been in private practice as a private judge ever since, where I handle civil matters, arbitrations, mediations, and complex discovery matters. I've got the whole ambit of experience over all the other candidates in this case. And I realize there are two other judges, but they don't come close to my experience as a judge or as a prosecutor. But addressing the graffiti, there are two types of graffiti. You can have felony level graffiti where you've charged tens of thousands of dollars or thousands of dollars in damage, as opposed to hundreds of dollars in damage. And so depending on how much property is damaged, if we're talking about significant structural damage or things like that, you could charge a felony. If it's just graffiti, just flat out graffiti, and it can be remediated with a few hundred or a couple of $1,000s, it should be charged as a misdemeanor, and they should be charged. These are things that degrade whole neighborhoods. It makes people fear. These are gang members in many instances that are marking their territory, and they're defying ordinary citizens to do anything about it, and I would eliminate that.
Judge, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. We wish you all the best. We've been speaking to Judge David S. Milton, running for Los Angeles County District Attorney. The election's coming up pretty soon, in just a couple of weeks. Your Honor, thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mottek, for inviting me to your show. Thank you very much, and bye now.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you very much. KABC, good afternoon. We are doing it live. Let's talk about another big issue here, the nation's fiscal health. A new roadmap is needed to address a projected unsustainable debt level. It's getting worse every day. Joining us live now is AKASH CHOUGULE, the Vice President of Americans for Prosperity, which is calling for that new roadmap in the face of these unsustainable debt levels. AKASH, thank you very much for taking the call here. I know you and everybody at your organization does a great job keeping track of all this. So where do things stand, and what needs to be done here to turn the situation around?
Well, no, I appreciate you having me on this afternoon. Long story short, things are not looking good. I don't think your listeners need to be told that much, but we've had two new reports from government agencies in recent weeks, and these are both nonpartisan agencies, or not agencies of Congress or of the administration or anything. One is the Congressional Budget Office. One is the Government Accountability Office. They're known as CBO and GAO. Folks might have heard those acronyms. Both of these reports paint a very, very dark picture about the nation's fiscal health. We are now, this year alone, going to spend more paying down the interest on our debt than we will spend on our national defense, and more than we will spend on Medicare. Let me repeat that. The interest that we're paying on our debt this year is more than we're paying for our national defense, and it's more than we will spend on Medicare this year. Both of those are far sooner than was originally projected. It's about 4 to 5 years sooner than originally projected. We're on course over the next couple decades to be north of $50 trillion in debt. And the major drivers of that national debt, for everything you hear about government shutdowns and funding for Ukraine and Israel and pet projects and all that stuff, all of that is a drop in the bucket. What's made clear with these reports is what we've known for a long time. The major drivers of our national debt, of our reckless federal spending, are those mandatory spending entitlement programs that are on autopilot. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, Obamacare subsidies, and, of course, those interest payments on the national debt. If we do not get those programs under control, we are headed for automatic cuts to those benefits, and they simply will not be around for people who need them within the next decade or shortly thereafter.
I don't know if you remember this, but back during the Reagan years, for example, the question was always asked to lawmakers, how are we going to pay for this? But that question rarely, if ever, gets asked anymore. It's just assumed that there's just a ton of money out there for everything. And then remember, Ross Perot came along and said, in order to see if you have a problem, you have to open the hood. And that was really the last time, what was that, in 92, when this issue came up big in a presidential election cycle, certainly. Are any of the candidates here talking about this? President Biden, obviously, seems to be spending big, and President Trump also, I have to say, spent pretty big in the face of that crisis, of course. But you've taken a closer look at all this. What do you see ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one thing where Trump and Biden are basically on the same page. Both of them have pledged not to touch our entitlement programs, and they're both doing nothing but playing political games. They know that it's, unpopular with voters. It's easily demagogue. And so, unfortunately, Trump and Biden are nearly identical on this issue, both with entitlements and their existing records on spending. Trump spent trillions and trillions of dollars. He added $9 trillion to our national debt, and the vast majority of that, of course, predates COVID. It was in the first 3 years of his administration. Biden, of course, has been no better. She is obviously a long shot at this point, but I think one place that Nikki Haley deserves a ton of credit is her clarity and her honesty on this issue of reckless spending and entitlements. And I think there's two things that she has been saying that voters should really be applauding and taking heed of. One is, just since COVID, our spending has jumped enormously just since COVID. And obviously, the relief spending and helping states and all that, some of that spending, probably had to be done, but there's no reason for that spending to continue at that level. And so she has pledged to veto any spending bill that doesn't take us back to pre-COVID levels. I think that's an obvious step one. The other is that she is being honest about Social Security and Medicare. Right now, under current law, this is written into existing current law, if we do not address these shortfalls, there will be a 23% cut to people's Social Security benefits within the next 8 years. Medicare shortly thereafter. There are automatic cuts baked into the law, into these programs, if we don't do anything about them. That's the position Trump and Biden are taking. Haley, fortunately, has a plan to address these programs that protects the benefits who are currently beneficiaries who are currently on these programs or those who are near retirement. But for people in their 20s or in their teens who are either just entering the workforce or not yet in it, she's pledging to make some reforms to make sure these programs are there when they need them as well. I think she should be applauded for her honesty and clarity. I wish more politicians in Congress, frankly, who are the ones who should be doing something about this, would face that truth as well.
Right. I remember when Claude Pepper was the head of the House Ways and Means Committee, and he was talking about making Social Security safe, solvent, and secure for the next 75 years. That was back in the 80s. And what is it going to take to make that important program safe, solvent, and secure for the next 75 years?
Well, there's a number of things. People have talked about raising the retirement age. I think that's actually a very, very reasonable proposal. Of course, not for anyone who's 50 years old or 60 years old and is on the verge of retirement. But life expectancy is significantly higher today than it was when Social Security was created, Medicare was created, decades ago. And so, I'm 34 years old. Anyone who's around my age or younger, there's no reason they should be held to the same, retirement age as when Social Security was created, because they're expected to live much longer. So I think raising the retirement age is a very obvious way to look at things. I think we have to potentially look at the benefits that the mega wealthy are receiving. We have to look at these Medicare Advantage plans. Seniors love these Medicare Advantage plans, and they're a low-cost option for the government as well. And so I think there's a number of things that we can be doing to Social Security and Medicare. There simply is not the courage, the political courage in Congress right now, because of the way this issue is demagogue and because of the leadership of Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Republicans and Democrats alike in Congress are afraid to tackle this issue. Your listeners may have heard some chatter about Speaker Mike Johnson wanting to form a debt commission. I think that's a really constructive move. It's something that's in conversation now. It will hopefully soon be voted on the House floor. Speaker Mike Johnson should really be applauded for trying to pursue a debt commission to at least start the conversation in Congress to do something about these issues.
Akash, thank you very much for taking the call, and thank you very much for your work in all this. AKASH CHOUGULE, Vice President of Americans for Prosperity, live with us here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. Stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with your host, Randy Wang, coming up next here, 790 KBC.
You loved Lala Kent on Vanderpump Rules. Now get to know her on Give Them Lala.
We're going into Vanderpump Rules. Easton, you told me that Raquel is a little nervous. She talks about it on Rachel Goes Rogue, that she's a little nervous for her podcast to be airing while season 11 is airing. Let me tell you something. She should have come back to the show. It would have been very different than what she thinks it would have been. She shot herself in the foot. She's not the brightest bulb. We all know this.
Watch what Lala is talking about on YouTube or search for Give Them Lala wherever you listen.